Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Danny, the Champion of the World, Chapter 6B. Let's say hello to Rebel. Evening, Rebel. Don't worry, Mr. Victor Hazell's gone, we think. Over to Pesco the Pheasant. Evening, Pesco. You're looking very comfy, roosted up there. Okay, and even Mr. Shoutout's pointing out how smart Pesco is looking this evening. Right, everybody, let's get on with the story. Now then, yesterday, Rebel still hasn't recovered from Mr. Hazell. Yesterday, we met Victor Hazell, who'd come to Danny in his father's garage and been really, really nasty to Danny, telling him that he'd give him a good hiding. And then Danny's dad came out like any dad would and told him to get lost. Now, as we know, Mr. Victor Hazell is a very rich man, and he's a big snob. And he owns all of the land everywhere around where Danny and his dad live, apart from Danny's dad's filling station and workshop and little field. So he owns everything around them. Now, Danny's dad told him to get lost last night, and he did do. He left in his car, or as we had it, the great big red monster truck, El Fuego. But But we're going to find out today, Mr. Hazell tries to get some form of revenge, and let's see what he actually does. So we'll get to the bit where Danny's dad says, "Now go away." "Now go away, please," my father said. "We do not wish to serve you." He took the key from my hand and tossed it through the window. The Rolls-Royce drove away fast in a cloud of dust. The very next day, an inspector from the local Department of Health arrived and said he had come to inspect our caravan. Now, here's what an inspector might look like. There he is, looking very official, with his hard hat and his clipboard, and we've got Danny's dad here, and Danny meeting the inspector. "What do you want to inspect our caravan for?" my father asked. "To see if it's a fit place for humans to live in," the man said. "We don't allow people to live in dirty, broken-down shacks these days." My father showed him the inside of the caravan, which was spotlessly clean, as always, and as cosy as could be. And in the end, the man had to admit there was nothing wrong with it. Soon after that, another inspector turned up and took a sample of petrol from one of our underground storage tanks. My father explained to me they were checking up to see if we were mixing some of our second-grade petrol in with the first-grade stuff, which is an old dodge practised by crooked filling station owners. Of course, we were not doing this. Hardly a week went by without some local official dropping in to check up on one thing or another, and there was little doubt, my father said, that the long and powerful arm of Mr. Hazell was reaching out behind the scenes and trying to run us off our land. So this tells us that Mr. Hazell knows lots of very important, powerful people, and he's trying to send lots of people to inspect Danny's father's business and land to try and put him out of business. But so far, he hasn't succeeded. So all in all, you can see why it gave my father a certain pleasure to poach Mr. Victor Hazell's pheasants. That night, we put the raisins in to soak. Now, let's do that now. We've got a little pot of water, and to prepare the raisins for poaching, to plump them up and make them nice and fat and juicy for all the pheasants to eat, we'll soak them in the water, and we'll see what they're like tomorrow. I wonder how much I've never soaked raisins. There they are. That's pre-soaking. So we'll see what they're like when they're all soaked up after a day or so, shall we? Just like Danny's dad did. The next day was poaching day, and I don't think my father didn't know it. From the moment he got out of his bunk in the morning, the excitement began to build up inside him. This was a Saturday, So I was home from school, and we spent most of the day in the workshop decarbonising the cylinders of Mr. Pratchett's Austin 7. Now, I haven't got a model of an Austin 7, but let's pretend our saltwater engine car is the Austin 7. They've been cleaning out the cylinders. Now, in an engine, all the cylinders are these parts here, you see? There's 4 on that side and 4 on that side. It's where all the little explosions happen inside the engine. So, this is an 8-cylinder engine. So, they've been cleaning out the cylinders of Mr. Pratchett's Austin 7. It was a great little car, built in 1933. A tiny miracle of a machine that still ran as sweetly as ever, though it was now more than 40 years old. My father said that these Austin 7s, better known in their time as Baby Austins, were the first successful mini-cars ever made. Mr. Pratchett, who owned a turkey farm near Aylesbury, was as proud as could be of this one, and he always brought it to us for repair. He must trust Danny's dad. Working together, we released the valve springs and drew out the valves. We unscrewed the cylinder head nuts and lifted off the head itself. Then we began scraping the carbon from the inside of the head and from the tops of the pistons. I want to be away by 6 o'clock, my father said. Then I will get to the wood exactly at twilight. Now, twilight. Why at twilight? I asked. Because at twilight, everything inside the wood becomes veiled and shady. You can see to move around, but it's not easy for someone else to see you. Children, if you don't already know, twilight means just as the sun is about to disappear, or just after it's disappeared, when it's not quite fully dark, but it's certainly not light. And when danger threatens you, Danny, you can always hide in the shadows, which are darker than a wolf's mouth. That's a super simile. Then why don't you wait until it really gets dark? I asked. Then you wouldn't be seen at all. You wouldn't catch anything if you did that, he said. When night comes on, all the pheasants fly up into the trees to roost. Let's have a look at Pesco. There he is. He's roosting on his perch. Pheasants are just like other birds. They never sleep on the ground. Twilight, my father added, begins about 7:30 this week, and it's at least an hour and a half's walk to the wood, and I must not leave here later than 6 o'clock. Are you going to use the sticky hat, or will it be the horsehair stopper? I asked. Sticky hat, he said. I'm very fond of the sticky hat. When will you be back? About 10 o'clock, he said. 10:30 at the latest, and I promise I'll be back by 10:30. Are you quite sure you don't mind being left alone? Oh, quite sure, I said. But you will be all right, won't you, Dad? Don't you worry about me, he said, putting his arm around my shoulders and giving me a hug. But you said there wasn't a man in your dad's village that didn't get a bit shot up by the keepers sooner or later. Ah, my father said, yes, I did say that, didn't I? But in those days there were lots more keepers up in the woods than there are now. There were keepers behind almost every tree. How many are there now in Hazell's Wood? Oh, not too many, he said, not too many at all. I think Danny's dad is trying to make Danny feel better and not worry, because I think Danny's going to worry. As the day wore on, I could see my father getting more and more impatient and excited. By 5 o'clock, we had finished work on the baby Austin, and together we ran her up and down the road to test her out. At 5:30, we had an early supper of sausages and bacon, but my father hardly ate anything at all. I wonder why he couldn't eat anything. Why couldn't Daddy's dad eat anything? Maybe you can tell me on Seesaw, children. At 6 o'clock precisely, he kissed me goodbye and said, Now, promise not to wait up for me, Danny. Put yourself to bed at 8 and go to sleep, right? He set off down the road, and I stood on the platform of the caravan, watching him go. I loved the way he moved. He had that long, loping stride all countrymen have, who are used to covering great distances on foot. He was wearing an old navy blue sweater and an even older cap on his head. He turned and waved to me. I waved back. Then he disappeared round a bend in the road. Right, so Danny's dad. Okay, we'll find out what happens out to him in the woods tomorrow.